Welcome to JonGetsGames. Today I'll be reviewing 51st State, the Master Set Edition. In this 2 to 4 player game, you will be in the post-apocalyptic Neuroshima world, and this is a multi-use card game where you will be building a tableau in front of you, as well as discarding cards to get resources, and potentially destroying some of your opponent's cards as well. First, I will show you how the game plays, and then I'll jump into my review. The first thing you need to do is create the draw deck. Now this is the base game right here, but the game also comes with 2 additional expansions. You can shuffle one or the other into this main deck and then play with that. For now, I'll just show you with the basic cards. And now each player chooses one of the 4 asymmetric factions that come in the game, and it's neat to note that they have a male side on them and a female side. Each round in 51st State begins with the lookout phase, in which we draw cards from the top of the deck equal to the number of players plus 1. So if it was a 2-person game, we would have 3 cards in the middle, and then the person who is the starting player would choose one of these cards for their hand, then the next player would take one of these cards for their hand, and the last card would get discarded. And now we'll do that one more time, but in this time, the person who is not the starting player gets to choose one of these cards first, then the starting player gets to take one of them, lastly this is discarded, and we can move on. And now each player goes into production, and I've skipped forward into the middle of the game where a player might have some cards played already, and they're going to make all the goods that are on their player faction board, which are different between the different players. Then they're going to make goods for all the deals they've made, and for any of the buildings that they have in production. So right here they would get 3 people, they would get 1 scrap, they're going to get 1 gray contact token, as well as 1 more random card from the top of the deck. Then when you look at their deals, they're going to get a gun and a brick. And then finally, this assassin down here is going to make them 1 additional gun. So this is all the stuff that they start with for this round. This is a tableau building game, so let's show you how you play cards down into the field. Now, if you look at your hand, you'll see that every single card has a distance value on the left-hand side. Now, this is the cost to do various things for the card, but the first thing is if you want to play a card down, you're going to need to spend gray contact tokens, which look just like this, equal to the distance value on the card. So right now, I only have the 1 gray contact token. I could spend it. I won't be able to buy any of these cards here because they all cost 2 or 3, but I could buy this school here and put it down into my production area. Now, you know it's a production card because down here on the bottom it says production. And when you look at your player board, you see it says production, then feature, and finally action. And this just shows you how to sort your cards, so all production cards will go up here, all features will go here, and then finally all the action cards will get slotted down there. One great thing about building these production cards is that they immediately produce. So this says it produces 1 person. That means you're going to get this now and at the beginning of every subsequent round in the game. Also, many buildings have building bonuses on the bottom. You get that one time the moment you place the card. So for placing this card down, we would actually get 2 more people to play with on this round. Now let's look at the 4 basic actions that come on the player board. The top 3 are slightly different between the 4 different factions, and the bottom one is the same for all factions. And these are essentially little conversion ratios. We can see that the New York player could spend 1 cog to get 1 gray token, 1 gun to get 2 red tokens, or 2 fuel to get 2 blue tokens. And when they do this, they take the item and they put it down on the board to show that they've done that action, and then they immediately are going to make whatever it is that's on that line. And it's important to know that you can do each one of these lines once per round, so on a future turn within this given round, I could take this cog here, go down here and evaluate that line there, but I can no longer spend guns to take these red contact tokens. Down here, you'll see that you can spend 2 people to gain 1 resource of your choice, so that makes 2 people wild, or you could take a random card off the top of the deck. And the nice thing about the bottom one is you can do that as many times as you want in a given round. In fact, in a given turn, I could spend 4 people right now to just take 2 brick from the supply if I felt like it. So we know what these gray tokens are for, but what about these red ones here? Now these allow you to destroy things. The easiest thing that you can destroy are cards that are in your hand. So if you look at the cards in your hand, once again, you'll see the distance values, but you might also notice that there are these spoils in the top right corner of each of these cards. Now, in order to destroy one of these cards and get the spoils, you need to discard these red tokens equal to the distance. So I could spoil this fuel tank here by discarding a single red token back to the bank, and then I would get 2 fuel from the bank and put it right in my area. An alternate thing that you could do with these red tokens is instead of destroying cards from your hand, you can destroy opponents' buildings that are in their tableaus. Now, if you look at the player board, you'll see a 3, 4, and 5. This is the defense rating for all cards in that row. So if an opponent wanted to destroy one of my buildings, these production buildings, they would need to discard 3 of these red contact tokens. But if they wanted to destroy an action building, it would cost 5. And let's just say that they did that. They spent 3 red contact tokens to destroy this school. Now, the reason they might do that is because the moment this gets destroyed, they're going to get all the spoils on that, so they would get 2 people. But as a bonus to us and a bit of a consolation prize, we would also generate a person because we would do whatever is in the bottom portion or the deal portion of the card, which I've shown you before can produce things for you, and I'll show you how to make those in just a minute. So in this case, this card would be destroyed. I would get a person because that was on the bottom of the card, and then this card would get flipped over and placed like this. It is now a ruins, and I'll explain why that matters in just a little bit. Now let's pretend that the player spent these 2 fuel in order to make 2 of these blue contact tokens so that I can show you what they do. As I just pointed out a moment ago, the bottom of every card in this game has a little deal section, and you might notice that it's actually upside down. In order to make a deal with the card, you need to discard blue tokens equal to the distance value on the top of the card. So we can make a deal with this pub right here by discarding both of our blue tokens. You're going to flip this card over now, and you'll tuck it into your deals section. And just like the production buildings, the moment you make a deal, it immediately produces. And this one right here actually generates us a card from the top of the deck. So we just take that and we put it into our hand. For your transaction, you can also evaluate one of the cards that you've built that has an action on it. So this one right here says you can spend a person and a cog in order to get 2 victory points. So you would take the person and cog, put it on the card to show that you can't do it again on this turn, and then you're going to get those victory points. And then you log all victory points on this track right here. Another action you can take is a development action, and for this, you have to spend a brick from your supply, and then you could place a card from your hand into your tableau. All you have to do is match up the symbols on the left-hand side of the card with the symbols on one of your face-up cards currently, and you will discard that card. So for instance, I could take this scrap metal spot, which is a feature which lets us put 3 scrap parts on it immediately, and I put that down in my feature zone, and I can only do that because this card right here has the scrap symbol on it, and in the process of doing it, I'm going to be discarding this card entirely. So this gets destroyed. We essentially develop this shipwreck into a scrap metal yard, and each time you develop, you get a victory point. And coming back to this ruin card that we got when somebody destroyed our school earlier, we can always spend a brick to do a development action and discard a ruins, and this effectively matches any symbol on any card in your game. It's a wild symbol. So this goes away, and I could just take this distance 3 gasoline drinker's den and place it down immediately, so it's a really cheap way to get down expensive cards. The last action type I'm going to discuss are these 2 connection piles. You reveal the top card of each of these in the lookout phase at the beginning of each round, and for your action, you can take the card into your hand and then use it later as your action to get a bonus. In this case, it would be to get 3 blue contact tokens, and in this case right here, it would be to get 2 red contact tokens. The important thing about these connection piles is that once somebody takes this card into their hand, you do not flip over the next card until the round is over and you start the next lookout phase. So only 1 person per round is going to get one of these 2 cards. If you can't or don't want to take any actions, then instead you can pass. And then all other players will keep taking actions until they've all passed as well. One nice thing about passing is that nobody can destroy any of your buildings once you've passed. After all players have passed, we then move into the cleanup phase, in which you actually lose all resources that you were not able to use in that given round. So all these are gone. Fortunately, you do get to keep all the cards that are in your hand for future rounds, and then you clear all the resources that are on the actions that you took throughout this given turn to show that on the next turn, they'll be open and usable for you. You may have noticed that on the score tracker, the number 25 is a little bit different than the rest, and that's because it is the threshold for ending the game. At the end of a round, if any player has exceeded 25 victory points, then you will not go on to a next round and you will do final scoring. And final scoring is really easy. You just add up all the cards that are in your tableau in front of you and add those to your score, and then that'll be your final score, and whoever has the most points is going to be the winner. It's now time to review 51st State, the Master Set Edition, and I'm going to begin with some positive points. The first of these relates to the great tableau engine building that you're doing while you're playing the game. Now, this is far from new to the game. In fact, from the same designer and publisher, we've seen the original 51st State as well as Imperial Settlers. And there are a lot of similarities when it comes to those games and this one with the tableau building, but that doesn't make it not great. I love the organized style that this game brings to your engine building, where you have all the production buildings along the top and they make you stuff. Then on the middle, you have these feature buildings, which are either ongoing effects or just one-shot effects that just get you points immediately and you don't have to worry about them anymore. And then down at the bottom, you have action cards, which let you use those resources and turn them into other resources or just turn them into victory points. Because at the end of the day, this really is a crank the handle and turn raw resources into victory points kind of game, but it does a really good job of displaying them in front of you and really just a satisfying experience watching this whole thing build up, and you can easily see where your strengths are, where your weaknesses are, and the player board itself is great. It just has vibrant art on it. It's just a really good tableau building experience. Positive number 2 relates to the satisfying feeling that solving the puzzle that each hand is going to be presenting you with gives you, because every card in the game can be 3 different things. It can be used as a production building, essentially, as you make it into a deal, or you could discard it for some one-shot resources, or you could use it as the card it's meant to be, as its action or its feature or something like that. So when you start the game with 7 cards, every one of them being 3 potential things, that gives you a lot of different options, and you right away start digging into what you could do. Occasionally, you're going to draw a hand and it'll be obvious. So like, oh, well, this synergizes with that, and then I could just do this and this and this. Cool. But more often than not, you have to think about it a little bit. You have to fight to work out what this hand of cards is really wanting you to do. And more often than not, I found that you will have something cool that you can do with pretty much any hand of cards, even if you see 0 synergies. When I've had that happen, I've ended the turn, looked down and been like, oh wow, I did a lot more than I at first thought I was going to do when I drew this hand. I thought it was like, oh crud, I'm not going to be getting anything done this first turn. But no, I got like 3 buildings down, I have a deal or 2, and I got this going, and I'm okay with the way this game started. So there is definitely some hand draw luck where sometimes it'll be easier than not, but I just like deciphering what my options are and then what the best path to doing a really good job with that hand is. Positive number 3 is the contact token mechanism, and this is one of the larger divergences between Imperial Settlers and 51st State Master Set. And if you don't remember what this is, in Imperial Settlers, you could just spend resources to build buildings. But in 51st State, you have to use your materials, turn them into these contact tokens, and then use the contact tokens to build the buildings or destroy buildings. And at first it seemed like an extra step, like why would they just throw that in there? That's weird. But as I started playing the game, I realized the brilliance of it, because it creates a checks and balances on just making lots of resources. If you make tons of resources in Imperial Settlers, you can almost always find a way to spend them and just build your entire hand and be like, oh cool, I did a lot of stuff, that wasn't very hard. But in 51st State, you really have to make sure you don't invest too much energy in making a bunch of resources that you can't immediately use. So just making a huge production engine early game is not going to be the key to victory at all in 51st State, because you have to turn those resources into a usable product. It's almost like having raw materials and you have to refine them in order to actually use them. And it's a great extra step. It really constricts the options that you have. And I just love the extra thinking that goes in to, again, like I just mentioned, the figuring out what you're going to be doing with your hand, and that restriction makes it so you can't just like, oh, I'll do this, which gives me resources to build that. Oh, I'll do this, gives me resources to do that. Very often you're going to be looking at your hand, you're like, I'm only going to build 2 of these cards. Like there's only enough contact token abilities for me to get 1 or 2 cards down, but what am I going to do with the other cards to do good stuff on my turn? And I just think the contact token mechanism is the thing that really brings that all together. And positive number 4 relates to the endgame trigger in 51st State. This is another big difference between 51st State Master Set and Imperial Settlers, because Imperial Settlers, you just always played 5 turns and that was it. But in 51st State, you are going to keep playing until the end of a round where somebody passes 25 victory points, and then you just total up and the game is over. Now, I've played this game many times now, and every single game I've played has been 4 turns. There was one game that was almost 3 turns, but none of them have even been close to going to 5 turns. So right off the bat, this is a faster game than Imperial Settlers, because in general, there is an entire turn left off. But also mechanically, I just think it's a vast improvement, because one issue with Imperial Settlers is I could see sometimes people would become a runaway leader, and like that last turn was just superfluous. Like it was obvious who was going to win. Maybe you're going to fight for 2nd or 3rd place, but why spend that extra 20, 25 minutes when you could just end the game and be like, okay, he won over there. In 51st State, it just does that. Also, it's a check and balance on somebody who's making a really good engine. You might look across the table and realize your opponent is out-engineing you, but you might just decide, okay, I'm going to just race to the end of the game. Like they are putting all these pieces together. They have great synergies, but maybe they don't quite have their victory point engine going just yet. I'm going to just race forward, end the game before they can really get that crazy engine that they've built going. And that's just a good thing. You need to always be careful and looking across to see when is the game going to end. Although, like I said, every single game I played has ended in 4 turns. So I'm actually kind of curious. It'll be interesting to see the first game where it does go to 5 turns or does go to 3 turns. But in general, I'm okay with 4 turns, and I just like the idea that the end game is in the control of the players. Now let's cover a couple neutral points, and the first of these relates to the amount of asymmetry there is between the factions that come in the game. Now they are different between each other, but I was expecting them to be a bit more different than they ended up being. pretty much the main difference is they start with a slightly different production token, and then they convert their resources into contact tokens at different rates. Like one race will be really good at making red contact tokens. One gun will make 3 of them. And another race is really good at making blue contact tokens. They can spend 1 fuel to get 3 of those. And that will make that blue contact race much better at making deals, and the red contact race much better at destroying cards from their hands or even destroying opponents' buildings. But it does not feel like, oh, I'm only going to win this game if I destroy my opponent's buildings and destroy lots of cards from my hand because I am this person who's really good at converting these red contact tokens. It's more like just a little bit added variety. Like, oh, this game, I'm going to be doing a little bit more red contact tokens than the others, but I'm not going to be like this vicious destroyer of everybody else's stuff because that's the way the faction is making me go. It's like a little hint. It's a little spice that adjusts the way you play a little bit, but does not leave me jonesing to play one race or another because, I don't know, they all feel pretty similar. And I am okay with that because it feels like a balanced experience, and it is fun, like kind of just taking a random one at the beginning of every game and just seeing how this one plays and this one give an instance. And so this is definitely not a negative, but in comparison to Imperial Settlers, which was very asymmetric because every single faction had its own deck of cards, this is a significant difference between the two games. And I actually think I prefer 51st State because in Imperial Settlers it felt like, oh, if you're the barbarians, you've got to be doing this, and if you don't do this, then you're going to lose. And oh, if you're Japan, then if you're not doing that, then oh, you're going to lose. It felt like it was kind of on rails, forcing you to go that direction. And in 51st State, no matter what faction you choose, it still feels like you can go in a variety of directions and still be very successful. Neutral point number 2 relates to the 2 expansions that come in the game. You have the base game, and then you have New Era, and you have Winter. And the game says you can shuffle one or the other of those into the base game and just have a slightly different experience. And I have done both of those, and the game was much better because of that. In fact, I would strongly advise you pretty much never play with just the base game. Maybe the first time you play with the base cards, but never go back there because it does feel a little samey and not quite interesting enough. Those expansions add a lot of variety of interesting cards and interesting synergies that really makes the game way better. So I think the base game works, but it's a very good thing the game shipped with these 2 expansions. But it says you can only use one or the other, and it is a bit frustrating at the end of the game sorting all the cards back out and putting them in the box. So one time I decided I just shuffled all of it together, even though I was told that it wasn't balanced to be like that and it probably won't be as good of a game. I just shuffled it all together, this huge pile, played a 3-player game of it, and you know what? It was fun. It was totally fine. I didn't see any problems with that play of the game, and it was kind of nice not having to worry about pulling all the cards back out again. Now, I know this is not the way the game is intended to be played, and almost every game I've played, I've done it as intended. I only tried this once, but I will admit, going forward, I might do this all the time because I just love the variety of the cards. Like, one deck has, that's the other thing. I've looked at the 2 different expansions, and they apparently have different vibes, but I have not analyzed each of them, and it did not jump out at me that one was, oh, really good at doing this, and oh, one is really going to force you to do that more often. It just seemed like a good variety of cards. So when I just crammed them all together, it seemed like even more variety. I will admit it seemed like there were quite a few of the lower value cards, lower distance cards, but that was just a single data set of one. Like, I had a big hand of cards and most of them were ones, and I was like, I wonder if that's because I'm playing the game as I'm not supposed to be playing it. But I still had a really good time. Everybody around the table still had a really good time, and I enjoyed the extra variety. So I guess this is something you could potentially do, and it speaks to the variety of the expansions that come in the game. So now let's go into my one negative for the game, and this is more of a pet peeve than a negative, if I'm being honest. And that has to do with the connection cards, the merchants and the punks connection cards that let you draw the card from the top of that stack, and now nobody else can get to it, and you can spend it later to get either more blue or red contact tokens. And on the face of it, I don't have a problem with these connection cards. They mechanically work. In fact, it is kind of an interesting decision, like when do you go and spend your action taking that card so that nobody else can take it from you because only one happens each round. But my issue is it just feels tacked on. Like, I think there's a reason it's there. I feel like the game is probably better off with them in there, like it's a better balanced experience. But I wish that the game had been developed in such a way that they would not be necessary and the already established mechanisms could be bolstered to stop somebody from finding themselves in a situation where they really need more blue contact tokens and they cannot get them. It feels like a bit of a band-aid mechanism that does help the game. They saw an issue, they threw those in to fix it, but when I see that kind of thing, it irks me. Like, I just think somehow, and I don't have the answer, I just think somehow maybe that issue could have been resolved without tacking on an extra little thing that needs to be added to the setup and put out every single time and explained while you're teaching the game. It just seems like it could have been worked out better. So let's discuss the replayability of 51st State, and I've actually talked about this a little bit already in neutral point number 2. I think that it is definitely above average. It's a very solid replayable experience because the game comes with those 2 expansions. If the game just shipped with the base game, it would have a big replayability problem because after even one play of the base game, I was like, okay, I need more variety of cards in here. But it was really smart of them to put these 2 expansions in because you can mix one expansion in one game and then another expansion in the next game and then come back to that first one. And as I talked about in neutral point number 2, you could go crazy like I did and shuffle it all together in one big pile and just have tons of variety. Like the number of cards that are going to be in there is going to really change the way you play each game because you're going to be only touching a smaller and smaller portion of that deck the bigger the deck gets. So I've been very pleased with the replayability of the game. 51st State Master Set plays 2 to 4 players, and I've played almost every game at a 2-player. I've done 1 3-player game, and I've not played the 4-player game, and that's because I don't really feel like I want to. This is, at its best, a 2-player game. It's a very, very good 2-player experience, and the 3-player game worked well too. I've only done 1 game of it, but I've talked to other people in my playgroup who have done 3-player games, and they have had nothing bad to say about it. They did not think it went too long. But pretty much everyone agrees 4 players feels like it's not going to be worth it. And the reason for that is because there is a lot to think about when you're playing this game. And one cool thing about the game is it has a simultaneous analysis vibe, and it just, you are all thinking about how you're going to solve your hand in front of you. So when it comes back to you, usually you're like, okay, well, I know that I'm going to need to do this. So I'm just going to do this, and it's the next person's turn. I'm going to go back to thinking about what I'm going to do in my hand. So it's somewhat rare that you are just sitting there with nothing to do, waiting for your opponents, really wishing they would take quicker turns. But I do feel like 4 players is not going to add enough to the overall gaming experience to be worth the extra time. That being said, if I was in a situation with 4 people and 3 of them really wanted to play the game, I would totally play it at 4. I would not veto it in that situation, but I think the game is best with 2, but certainly not bad at 3. In conclusion, 51st State Master Set is what I really wanted Imperial Settlers to be. It does seem to fix all the issues that I had with that prior game. It has wonderful hand management where you're trying to figure out how you're going to crack the code of this hand to do something cool without having runaway leader syndromes. It has the endgame threshold that just stops when the players want it to stop, because you end the game after somebody gets 25 victory points, not after a predetermined number of rounds. You won't have situations where somebody is obviously winning and you're just going through the moves to try and end the game before it does. You also have these wonderful contact tokens that restrict the options that you have, which enhance the decisions that you have to make, because even though you're restricted, it seems like there's always a way. You always figure a way around the restrictions, and it feels that much more satisfying to get really awesome stuff done. I haven't even talked about the theme and the art, but I will say that it's an interesting theme, and the art is stunning in this game. Like, almost every card, actually no, I take it back, every card has different art on it, and every card looks great. As opposed to Imperial Settlers that just every card was a different take on little houses and little chibi people, this is a much more satisfying experience to look at on the table. The bits are wonderful, they're all cut wood pieces that just feel great and look great, but of course Imperial Settlers had that as well. Like I said, this is the game that Imperial Settlers really wanted to be for me, and it has fired Imperial Settlers. I'm going to be removing it from my collection, and I am going to be keeping 51st State because I've enjoyed it so much. Not only have I liked it so much more than Imperial Settlers, my wife Jess really didn't like Imperial Settlers and really enjoys 51st State, and a couple other of my friends who are not impressed with Imperial Settlers have really enjoyed this game. So it's funny how you can make these small differences and turn it into a much better gaming experience for a certain subset of people. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I've just been totally impressed with this game. It's a wonderful hand management, tableau building experience, and I strongly recommend you give it a shot. If you'd like to see more in-depth board game reviews like this one, as well as full game playthroughs and vlogs, please subscribe to my channel. Also, you can directly support this channel at patreon.com/JonGetsGames. Thanks for watching.